Y'all, welcome. This is Parenting Teens and Tweens Unfiltered because, whoa, we have
a few.
We're in that phase, and we thought we have so many experts from the common parent that really all of you should be listening to. And if you feel, here's the thing. It's like you're building your toolbox by listening to them. And I think a lot of people just sort of cruise into the tween and teen world, and then you kind of handle it as it comes. But then in hindsight, you're like, I wish I had known what to do or what to say in those moments, because it's like you're laying the groundwork now for your tween or teens. And sometimes the train leaves the station and you weren't on the train. You're like, excuse me, I wasn't invited to your tween and teen world.
And sometimes you end up having a conversation with other moms and you hear how like they had dealt with it or handled it. And you're like, God, I wish that I had that perspective.
Maybe go on that side so this isn't in the...
I had
that perspective.
Before that, following this, us talking here, we actually have a expert on this podcast today, and it's Jordan Shapiro, and it is navigating kids in the video gaming world. And we're going to cover in this conversation 2 to 3 topics that will be important to the interview and our conversation regarding how it relates to the expert.
Here's what's really crazy. When we were in COVID, video games were seen as a way for kids to have social connection. So they were encouraged. They were there was a point where we lived, you could not actually go outside. Even if you went for a walk, it was like you were a dirty bird. Remember, you had to...
A dirty bird.
You were a dirty bird. You got bad looks. Like if you were biking, like what's wrong? You would get yelled at from the streets. Okay, in your normal neighborhood by your beautiful neighbors.
And even if you didn't live in an environment that was that strict, you know what it felt like that your kids weren't socializing the way that they normally were. And at that time, we were still doing lots of research for the common parent and talking to experts. And at that time, when we were worried because our kids were actually gaming, because what else did they have to do? We asked, is this going to become like a long-term, like addictive problem? And they were like, moms, we need to let you know during this time, this is the only way that they're socializing, because they're going online and they're talking with their friends when they can't meet with them. So this is a time where you can sit back and relax and let it slide. Let them play, let them socialize.
And the irony is,
we didn't think about the long term of how we're going to like go back on that.
And the irony is that no one had any research on like years and years of like like the groundwork for what we laid for video gaming, because I would say that it's my son's way to come home and like unwind and talk to his friends. Like there's so many of them that go on there.
They can't drive to meet with each other,
and I'm not driving him to meet with each other. So I think that it's healthy, but to what point? Because I know a lot of parents they also game on their phone. So they game on their phone, they game on a console, they game on like a Nintendo Switch, they game on the game. There's so many different ways they can actually game.
And we also have fears of not just gaming, but we know that a lot of them can connect with people all over the world and actually like start friendships and relationships with people that may or may not be who they say they are. And last night I was driving a kid and he said my mom was going to another country to visit her friend, and she brought my brother because he's online friends with her son. I said, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, he's never met him, but they online game together. And so they've become friends because the parents met and they were allowed to. But it's like he has an online gaming friend. You could have an online gaming friend in Brazil that is not your age. Like there's you feel scared because you're like, I want them to be able to unwind. I want them to be able to socialize. But what are the dangers of taking it too far? Because I know a lot of people Teddy's age on weekend nights, they game till 5 a.m.
No.
And the parents are like, yeah, they were gaming all night long. And could you imagine?
No, because it is addicting. Like, listen, there's pros and cons. Okay. Really, there is pros and cons. And I think that's what our expert's going to kind of go over, because I know from my son's physiotherapy, gaming's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Gaming's amazing for like neuroplasticity and for making your brain think in different ways. And it's actually like a form of biofeedback, and you can retrain your brain through different ways of gaming because you have to problem solve when you're using it. So gaming,
Also, reflexes.
So gaming from afar, gaming from a phone, I think is different than gaming from a screen, because if you're ever wondering as a parent the difference, if someone told us this, and I'll never forget it, when you have a phone or a computer, it's called a lean in experience. You'll find most people lean in, look over, and it's like them and the phone, and they often won't disconnect from that. When there's a distance, like a TV, when you're watching TV or a movie or you're gaming from afar, you're leaning back. So if you think lean in, lean back, when you're leaning back, more, you're aware of more things around you, and it's not such a intense, well, I would say
real gamers are sitting in chairs
very close.
They're not on their phones.
They're some of them go on the
computers, but they are sitting in gaming chairs and they have a TV in front of them. Those are the ones that do it for hours.
For hours. My son could go for hours. He doesn't even know what time it is. It's like they get lost in a vortex.
And if you talk to them, a lot of these people who are gaming, they do not know you're in the room.
And they put headphones on, so you can't, they're like in a different world. So I think it's to the level, to what the setup looks like, to who is around. Because if you have a small house and you're all in the gaming area, they can go to their own place and go game. It's very different than, there's 5 of you sharing one room and one's gaming. Someone's talking at you. You can't just zone in, right? So I think that when you're thinking of gaming, every single expert will say it's a problem when it interferes with your life.
So if you're too tired because you can't wake up to go to school, if you're not sleeping,
if you want to not go out and play with your friends because you'd rather be gaming, if you don't want to go to the family thing because you want to be gaming, you want to eat dinner, not now, you're not hungry because you're gaming.
I gotta wait to finish the game. But I when I read this, this is the first point is the case against gaming. When I read this, I was like, is this a bit teenagers who spend a lot of time playing video games or 2 on a computer are more likely to have a psychotic experience in their 20s, according to a new paper in the journal JAMA Psychiatry.
It's like a psychotic experience includes
thank you.
A wide range of incidents from mild suspiciousness and bizarre ideas to delusions and hallucinations.
So that is... I would have never even thought of that. The suspiciousness, where does that come from? Probably someone's coming up behind you and they're going to shoot you?
Well, have you ever seen your kid come up from gaming and they're like red in the face and it's like they just ran a marathon and they're at a heightened alert? They are at a heightened sense of it's
so they're having a psychotic experience.
I think it's more like cocaine. Like you actually feel like it's like a dopamine hit. Like you're like constantly like,
So it happens in their 20s from them playing as children?
Yeah. And then as teenagers.
Wow.
It's more likely, it sounds.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's more
and
likely.
Between 5 and 7% of adults typically will have psychotic experience at some point. Oh, just in general have a psychotic experience, but more likely if they play video games.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Did you know that when we pulled the cap, who is everyone who is listening to this, you can go to The Common Parent. You can subscribe to the cap for absolutely free. And it has all this information that you want to know about what's happening in the world of teen and tweens and just in general. And you can get stats, you can get conversation starters. You can
we'll
get
link
tips.
It down below.
You get links to podcasts, everything. That 64% of us, which is 45,000 parents, are concerned about their gaming habits, and the pandemic made bad habits. What we want to do here is, if you're concerned about anything in parenting, we want to talk about it and we want to unravel it, because you shouldn't be living in fear when you don't know the facts.
Yes, I would say that a big reason why I think it is more common in boys. That's just my generalization, for them to go down into this gaming world, because I feel like
I literally haven't, and I know, and I'm not going to generalize, but I have not heard of a girl who is in our world who is addicted to gaming like our boys are, and during the pandemic, your little girl, my girl, and your older girl all tried it, and it didn't catch.
No. And I think, I don't know what.
That's weird.
I feel like the boys, and this is such a generalization, and I only have one, and he's only 12, so it's very hard for me to be like, they're like this. But you
have my 3 as your experience too.
But in my,
and do you have 2 brothers? And I have a lot of brothers.
My brothers never gamed. We didn't have gaming.
But still, boys.
We played Super Mario. That was the fun. Yeah. I think that boys connect differently and girls are really, they like to gossip. They like to talk about real life. They like to, they thrive on
beating the shit out of every emotion and conversation and social situation. Whereas if a boy were to listen to that, my son would be like, why does she even care about talking about that?
And I feel like boys, I don't know what my son would do. I think he's overprogrammed 100%, in terms of he doesn't know what to do with himself if he's not gaming or playing a sport or on his phone.
Well, I said to my son today, I said, we can't go over to Kat's house because he's sick, and you can't just be on your phone all the time. And he's like, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah. And
I was like, watch a movie. I don't fucking know.
Yeah. And that's my fault. That's on me. Or I am the one, we've done this to our kids where I think they don't know what to do. We don't know what to do with them. If it's dinner time, they have no homework. They don't have sports at night. It's raining and there's nowhere to go. They're going to game. And if it's every night, that's why summertime frightened me. Like, it literally frightened me because I said to myself, everyone's going to be gone. You're going to be on your phone or you're going to be game. You will literally, if I don't program you, be doing that. So that was on me to be, it's really why camp became a no-brainer when he said he wanted to go.
I also don't think it's necessarily our fault, because even if we didn't overprogram, let's say we didn't that time,
still what would they do?
He still would have open space, so he would just maybe game more.
Yeah, I think that we're as a whole, we're really, we've really fucked our kids, and I don't know how many of them. I don't know how.
I mean, what did you spend your time doing? You probably spent so much time sitting in your room talking on your phone.
Yeah, on the phone. I talked a lot on the phone. I mean, when I was their age, definitely talking on the phone. I remember we'd go and meet up with our friends. Like, we'd all go walk and we'd roam. I feel like roaming the streets was a huge thing at nighttime. Like, when it was nice out, we'd just walk around the neighborhood.
People are lucky when they have a neighborhood that like you're friends with the kids on your street.
I think we do, but I think they're all programmed. Right. Everyone's got something. Met. What he knows a bunch of kids, but everyone's got hockey, baseball. Like, there's really
it's hard to schedule time.
There's no time. I don't know a lot of days when all the kids have nothing.
Idle time.
There's not a lot of idle time. And listen,
they start giving up on each other too.
They have their own idle time, right? Yeah. They have their but no one's schedule really coordinates. So I think
they'll be like, I'm not even going to ask my friend because he probably has hockey or he's probably busy, or
and also
our schedules
they're
don't work out.
12-year-old boys, right? So it's really hard to be like, oh, go call your friend. Like, it's like they have habits that we've created. So the gaming, I think that I don't know the alternative. I wish I could say, oh, do this instead. I mean, I need the break. If I'm to be totally honest with you, like when he's gaming, it's easier.
Yeah.
It's easier for me to be getting things done in with the other ones than me be like, don't game, don't go on your phone.
But here's a question.
Okay.
Also, what are the girls doing in that space where they're gaming?
So my little one is chronically dancing, talking on her hands, upside down, just around.
I guess in general, girls are probably just on social media.
Yeah, my 8-year-old is not. She doesn't.
No, but I mean, like, if teenage boys are gaming, teenage girls are on social media.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, no, it's a huge. I would say it's a huge. No one has to be bored anymore. No one has to just like, you can just go game. And I know they sit there and game together. Like, I know that they'll have a play date and they'll be gaming beside each other.
So fun for them.
So I know there's a lot of concern. I get the concern. I'm not concerned right now because he actually has, I think that what you want to look for, in my humble opinion, what I do is, number one, can they turn it off without a temper tantrum? Mm-hmm. Like, can they turn it off without a level 10 meltdown?
And we have friends who, if same thing would go for TV and for gaming, and they cannot handle that transition. That's when that's something you need to look into.
The other thing is if they can self-regulate. So can they come upstairs? Like, do they just turn it off on their own without being told? So my son often will turn it off and come upstairs. It's not like he comes home, he's like, I gotta go game. I think it's the urgency that they put to it, and then the upsetness of when they have to get off of it. Like, look for those correlations, because if he was basically running downstairs and not changing and not getting a snack and just had to go game and then wouldn't get off of it till I was like, it's time to come up now at a 10:30.
So Pat's son does not have a problem.
I think he could. But I mean, he doesn't at this moment. But I always am looking. I'm proud of him when he puts it down and he comes up and like watches a show. Like he gets over it. I think some kids don't.
Yeah.
I think some kids don't
I know
get
that.
over it.
Yeah.
Where mine's is kind of like, I'm bored now. So I think you're looking.
I think if you're worried, you know that there's something. But just so you know, there are a lot of situations like where you don't have to worry.
Well,
but
64% are worried.
But I'm saying those 64%, some of you, if you're listening to how Kat's describing her son, she's not in this situation worried about it. So maybe you don't have to be as worried about it. But if you are more worried about it, then you just need to look more into it. You need to do more research. You need to find out signs to look for when it does become a problem. And then the other thing is, it's funny. We were talking in here about people and kids that are less active.
Yeah.
And my daughter had to write a literacy test yesterday.
Ooh.
I said to her, I go, anyways, side note, it's not for marks, but you do have to pass it to graduate, but you could get a 50. And she's like, I put all this effort into it and it's really for nothing. But and everyone had different questions. Hers are teenagers busy now? And I was like, did you mean active? She goes, no, it was busy. And you had to interpret it however you wanted. And her whole thing was during the pandemic, our standards for being active were so low that now teens are doing a little bit and think a lot of teens, so not like our kids who are doing all these sports, they're doing a little bit and they're thinking that's a lot because it used to be nothing.
Right.
So and our standards were so low that a lot of teens are used to sitting around a lot and they think it's normal. And that's going to be a long-term effect of COVID, which obviously there was going to be that.
Just a whole bunch of lazy teenagers.
Lazy teenagers who think if they do a little bit, I've done so much already today. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? I went on a walk. I'm sorry. A short walk around the block's that's not enough. And they were saying that adults who quit exercising early as teenagers are less focused, less confident, less calm, less composed as adults as to those who kept activity as teenagers. So the things that they do as teenagers and stay active will actually affect them as adults. Well, I have to say that's a whole another can of whoop ass. Although it has to do with gaming too, because if they're gaming, they're being less active. But I was a very active adolescent.
So you're done.
I would
Congratulations.
With 50% of the silent 78 plus said they were active daily. So does that mean that like 78 plus meaning they're still alive? And that's why, because they were active. And they're not
Oh
dead.
my God. I think it's really, it's so.
Oh, and then the Gen Z says a lot less of them were active as adolescents. Of course, this makes sense. But what's going to happen as we get older?
I think that we are hopefully going to find balance and not be so competitive. Because I think that the sports is really, it's either all or nothing. I said to someone recently, I'm like, I don't know why in our city we live in, it's either competitive or bust. Like there's very little house league fun. Like there's very little leagues where you can go and commit, twice a week and have fun. It's like pick up. They're often older. They're like university students age who create like these leagues like pickleball and those like those things. Our kids right now, and one of my children is at the lowest level you can possibly play. It's 4 times a week at all year round at the lowest
so for her
level.
age, there isn't like just a house league,
I
like
guess
come out once a week.
There's just not enough girls, I guess, who want to do it. So, I mean, the top tier was too much. Second tier, too much, even though it was the same amount of time. This is like less pressure, but still 4 times a week. 4. That's
intense.
That is a lot of time commitment for a teenager who's also trying to get good grades, also trying to do other
does
things.
Does she also have the option? Do you say that she's 4 and she only has to go to 2? Because that's beautiful if that's true.
That is true, yeah. But I mean, they still feel the pressure of not going. They still have like, oh God, I have to go to this one because I didn't go to that one. I mean, most go to 4. Right. So I think that we were, and I just even know with other sports, I think we're missing the big picture of the health of the kids rather than this whole, let's put them in this competition because they're not going anywhere. They're not, unfortunately, most people are not going anywhere in sports, especially girls.
It's not unfortunate. I mean, sports is just, I always looked at it as just something you do. I never looked at it as a long-term thing.
Well,
I just thought it was just being involved.
Let's treat them like they're going somewhere and hold them accountable to the highest level, but then put the pressure on them so they don't want to do anything.
It's kind of like, it's funny. I have a friend whose office since COVID, they are 4-day a week. And they told them 4-day a week. It's like your soccer, but people were still working on Fridays. And that was making the people who thought it was only 4-day a week feel bad for not working on the Fridays. So they said, absolutely, we do not want anything on that Friday. We don't want your emails. You're not lining up meetings. You do not work on Fridays, because you doing that is putting the pressure on them, and we don't like that. Could you imagine?
I mean, we get to do that, but yeah, no, I couldn't imagine. We screw ourselves every way. Gaming's bad for you. Doing too much sports is bad for you. But don't do too little, but don't do too much. But make sure you're active between the ages of 15 and 18, but also get great grades. Like, make sure you get 100% of grades and study. Focus on studying, but also go train 4 days a week till 10 o'clock at night, but get a good night's sleep. Make sure you eat enough.
Not too much screen time. I think that the most important thing here is that we have these conversations with each other, because so many people feel alone because they don't want to admit that their kid is gaming this much, or
validation is key. Validation is key. That's all you need, is be validated.
Be validated and have and talk with each other. And if you can't talk with anybody, you can talk with us. You can listen to these podcasts. You can listen to the experts, and you can come into the Common Parent. And we have a place where you can talk. You can be anonymous, and it's you can mention things, you can comment on things, you can ask people.
And actually, this the podcast you're about to listen to, even though this one was longer than it was supposed to be, is going to help you and give you some tips. And Common Parent members, you will get it into your inbox. So there you go. Enjoy.
We're so excited to do this podcast, but I think because to introduce you guys and everything you are and do is really long. Can you tell us who you are and what you do?
Cam, you go first.
Sure. So my name is Cam Adair, and I'm the founder of GameQuitters.com, which is a support community for gamers and their families. I come at this issue from my own personal experience. I struggled with it growing up as a gamer, and then going and playing 16 hours a day, dropping out of school, being suicidal, all this stuff. And now I'm a speaker. I travel around the world to places like Lebanon, where Jordan and I spoke at a wonderful event, and just try to do as much as I can to educate people on these issues.
And I'm a parent and an educator and an author, and I guess when my kids were very little, I just took a very big interest in trying to understand how we make sense of the world that they're growing up in. And so I've done a lot of writing, traveling, research, just trying to really understand the truth about how technology integrates into our children's lives and how we make sure that happens in a healthy way.
Yeah, too. I mean, I wanted to know first, how'd you two get together at the conference? That's where you met.
In Beirut, we met.
Yep. In
Yes.
Beirut, Lebanon.
This conversation feels so important and huge, because I feel like our generation is the first generation raising children online without the full understanding of what online looks like. So our kids are living in a world that for the first time, most parents have no idea about, and they either fear it or are ignorant to it, because it's much easier just to pretend that they're not living in that world, than actually trying to consume it and understand what's happening. For you two, I mean, I don't know how we start or where we start, but Cam, I know we kind of threw like suicide and gaming in kind of the same sentence. And I think that for a lot of parents, that's like, pardon. And do you think that gaming is sort of a direct result of your mental health and where you ended up, or was it a combination of events?
Yeah, these issues are always going to be a combination of events. For me, gaming was something that was really exciting. I'm a competitive guy. I played high-level hockey in Calgary, and then I'd go home and play video games. I played competitive games. I was playing StarCraft and Counter-Strike and, eventually World of Warcraft. For me, when I was being bullied at school, which was also a big, tough thing I went through, that led to not feeling safe at school or on hockey teams. And gaming was that kind of place where I could escape and get away. And it did a really good job of that. So as much as like, I had a lot of mental health things going on, and I think a lot of kids do these days, and yet gaming also was very captivating and could maintain my attention for 16 hours straight. And so I kind of fell into this hole where these events led me to seek out gaming, but then gaming was very proficient at keeping me there. And then I found it very difficult for me to stop gaming. And this led to spending less time in my kind of real life or physical world. And that made the mental health even worse and worse and worse until my situation did hit rock bottom and it got super serious.
You know, it's crazy. Yesterday, we were talking to another parenting expert that said from lack of sleep can lead to so much mental health and suicide. And I'm assuming that because you were so addicted to the games, you probably didn't sleep as much as you should have been either, right?
Well, sleep was bad. My diet was bad. I had virtually no relationships in person anymore. My relationship with my family was bad. I dropped out of school. I was pretending to have jobs, sneaking into my bedroom window. I mean, like you go down the list. It was not good. And, I think it's really important though. And I think Jordan and I really kind of connect on these points is that like gaming can fall on the spectrum, right? So most people who play are fine. Some people who play, it can lead to certain levels of problems. Those problems are often complex. They have a lot of things going on. And overall, my main point isn't so much that gaming is bad and nobody should play, but more we want to understand what someone's relationship is to it. And the reality is that there are people who are struggling. And I think they need to be able to have the support that they need to get better, both as individuals and as families. And whether that's a mental health issue or a gaming one, for me, it's just ultimately, how do we help them get better?
And Jordan, I'm assuming you're not coming from a place of being addicted to gaming, but you're coming from a place of trying to understand the perspective of how Cam got there, right? Is that a fair assumption to?
Yeah, I think that's true. I'm super pro on positive about technology for our children. I think they need more, not less, but they need a healthier attitude to it. The bottom line is that we all have technology is a part of our lives, right? Like we use it for everything. I was just thinking about, someone asked me when's the earliest age to have kids have access to technology. I'm like, that's not even a real question because people are sharing photos and using apps to track sleep. Like before the baby even has agency, where they're already in a digital world, right? And so our real question is, when do we let them do it themselves? And as parents, we really need to ask ourselves, how do we make sure that happens in healthy ways? What I love about Cam is that Cam is acknowledging, as we all know, that there are people who develop really unhealthy relationships to technologies, just like there's people who develop really unhealthy relationships to food or sex or money or all kinds of things, right? And in each of those cases, we need to be prepared to have serious interventions. But I'm actually interested in how do we make sure it doesn't happen in the first place, because I think a lot of it comes because we haven't modeled the healthy relationship to technology from the earliest ages, right? So what happens is, we're basically tell kids all the time that while they watch, as all of us adults sit here like we're doing right now, making a social media video, that social media is bad and addictive and you shouldn't do it. So they're getting a really mixed message. I suspect that today's teenagers, when the ones who look fine, they're the ones who are going to be in therapy when they're 30, confused about why did I feel so much shame about this thing that I love, because their teachers and their parents and everyone kept telling them that. And I think that leads to the unhealthy relationships. Now, that's not that. What Cam's doing that's so great is working on the interventions once those have happened.
So, Cam, at what did your caregivers understand that you were addicted, or was it almost too late when everyone was like, what do we do now? Or do you wish they had been like, this is out of the house?
It's a difficult question, primarily because, as you started with, you're the first generation of parents having to raise kids in a digital environment. Now, I'm 34 years old, and now imagine my parents when I was a teenager, right? So I remember when we had dial-up internet, and I remember trying to call my best friend Brett, and I was like, dude, get off the internet. I'm trying to call you, and now, like, that's no longer something that would happen. But it's my parents, the available information for them back then was zero, right? And people would say, just take it away, which sounds like really good advice, except I would run away from home. I remember putting passwords on all the computers so no one could use a computer until I was ungrounded. I hid power cords of all the TVs until I was ungrounded. No one got to watch TV. Like, I terrorized my parents. And so for them, my dad smashed my router one day and I smashed the family camera 5 minutes later, right? So it wasn't something where I was really responsive to those sorts of interventions. And I do think that I was a difficult case. My parents had virtually no help and no support and no awareness around this topic. But the thing they did such a beautiful job of, though, at the end of the day, was they always made me feel like I could go to them at any moment and they would listen and be available. And that night, when I had written a suicide note and was planning to follow through with it, and I kind of had like a big epiphany that I was in danger to myself, I went to my father, asked him to help me, and he did. And we had that relationship that was good enough for me to do that. So I think no matter what, that's crucial.
What did that look like for you? As I think that every parent is sitting here being like, what did that look like for you in terms of you knowing you could always go to your parents when it seems like you had a really tumultuous relationship?
Yeah, I think I was unresponsive in many ways often, but my dad was pretty savvy. So for instance, like talking to me while we were in the house or I was next to a computer was really, really difficult. And so you may be familiar, but in Calgary, there's a famous milkshake shop called Peter's Drive-In. And from my home to the milkshake shop was 20 minutes. So in the car, safe space to kind of talk or get the emotions out, like have a conversation. Then we'd have our milkshake, just enjoy our time together, and then drive home and have 20 minutes to kind of talk about how are we going to have a solution to this issue, right? So what are we collaborating on? What strategies are we going to implement? And that structure for me gave me a way to enter into a difficult conversation or a challenging topic and have space to actually work with it. And so I think he was always very good at facilitating that sort of interaction. So I knew in that moment I could go to him and we'd be able to find a solution together.
Wow. That's like a good small thing you can do. He lured you with the milkshakes, but he knew you wanted one.
Yeah.
I'm like,
I would always go, of course.
Yeah. You're like, a free milkshake? I'm in,
and then he conversation. So he got access to you.
Jordan, I think that now, since you have the research and Cam kind of has the experience, it seems like you guys are a perfect blend. I know you're pro technology, and how as parents can we navigate not getting to the place of addiction, but of a healthy relationship? And I know you're saying modeling is huge, but again, what if you have a 16-year-old and the ship has sailed and how do we actually instill this healthy relationship if we have a 14-year-old who's grown up in this world that we've conflicted them in?
Yeah, and by the time you're dealing with older teenage kids like Cam was, it's a really serious thing, and there's a whole lot of other things, as Cam has pointed out, that are also threads involved, right? Whether it's bullying or other things, and we tend to think that the solution is take it away, right? Which is not the solution, because there's just going to be some, when you're dealing with all these emotions of being a teenager, you're going to find some other way to do it, and it's probably also going to not be healthy, right? So it's not going to be like, oh, here, let's take the Xbox, now you're suddenly going to be the most healthy, well-adjusted cheerleader, right? Like, no, you're going to find some other way to deal with it, right?
But that's exactly what it feels like as a parent. It seems like the most logical solution is, if we have a problem with this, remove it. But you're so right. They'll find
but that's not the problem. And I think Cam has said that really clearly, right? Like, that's not the problem. That is a place where the problematic behaviors are getting even more problematic and leading to further problems, right? There's lots of other problems and they need to be worked out. And it sounds like Cam's dad was fantastic at going, hey, I need to talk to you. I need to understand. I need to really think about solutions, which was a way of actually empowering Cam to make those decisions himself and to manage that himself. What we need to do as parents, again, is start much earlier with starting to teach them the limitations, right? Starting to teach boundaries around technology. I started playing video games with my kids when they were about 4 and 6 years old, and after like 20 minutes I would go, well, we had our fun, time to move on. And I did that while they were so young. And 4-year-olds, 6-year-olds, like, they'll do anything their parents say. Like, yeah, they throw temper tantrums, but they're it's the teenagers who are the ones who are like, how come, why, explain why. When I used to say to my 4-year-old, stop, they'd go, do I have to? And I'd say yes. And they go, okay. Right. And then they get a sad face, but they didn't fight. That's the time where we have to start going, here are the boundaries. Right.
Right. I think also Jordan, Cam's dad made a great point of not just saying get off, but a solution to let's go do something together. So it's not just the kid's onus to be like, hey, get off of it. I have a question for you too.
My kids will say, if I tell them not to do something, they'll say, I have nothing else to do.
Yeah. So give them a reason to do it.
I usually just tell my kids then that I have lots of things they can clean.
Yeah.
They're bored.
Yeah. Do we think video games are a more addictive place than a Discord, a TikTok, an Instagram? Like, is there any scientific study that, because I feel though girls are less, this is totally gender basis, but girls have a less bias towards video games and probably more towards the chats and the snaps and the all of that. But are they on the same spectrum, or is one more addicted than the other?
I think that there's not. I mean, first of all, we have to acknowledge that there's a lot of question in the research about whether addiction is the right word to use, and I'm not an addiction expert, so I'm not even going to weigh in on that. Like, I don't even, I'm just acknowledging that there is. No matter what that word is, it's kind of irrelevant. The fact is, there are people who develop really unhealthy relationships to these things. So I don't really care what word we use to describe it. We need to deal with it. I guess what I would say is there's no research showing one is more or less. There's definitely no research connecting, on the gender. There are certainly less girls playing certain kinds of games than there are boys, and that's partially because there's games that are marketed to boys who want to identify in very typical notions of masculinity, and so there's more. There just happen to be more of those games that go that do that. But you have to also acknowledge that what happens on TikTok, what happens on YouTube, what happens on Instagram is also gamified, right? So in a way, it is still a kind of video game, right? It's still, it's still rewarding you based on how you follow the rules within a certain set of boundaries, or it's not rewarding you. So I don't think it's as simple as one or the other. Like anything else in a capitalist world, there's people behind it who are trying to sell things to us hard, and they will do whatever they can to get us to take money out of our pockets and hand it to them. And what we need to do as parents and as teachers and as just grown-ups in general is teach the next generation. Either we have to have a large cultural conversation about whether we want to allow people to be these kind of predatory marketers, or we have to and until we do that, actually not even until we do that, we have to as adults prepare our kids to deal with the reality of the fact that they exist. Right. So, when I was a kid and I would see the commercials for whatever toys it was, like, I'm trying to think of a toy that came out when I was a kid, like Teddy Ruxpin came out. Right. And the commercials are like, you want to be the cool kid on the block, you have to have, like, it literally would say that if you want the kids on the block to like you, you need to buy this thing. And I needed my parents or my older brothers to say, no, they're just selling to you. No one's going to think you're cool because you have the teddy bear. And they did that. And it's the same thing. It's just a lot more of it right now, and a much more direct delivery mechanism.
And COVID accelerated my 6-year-old and 5-year-old was on Roblox. And then, thank God I have older children who were saying, hey, mom, she's talking to a stranger. And I'm like, what? I don't even know what you're playing right now that you can talk to strangers on Roblox. And I think, Cam, did your parents understand the world you were living in, or was it so foreign to them that they just knew the behavior was not what was like kind of traditional for everyone else? Because I feel like, parents are still in the situation your parents may have been in, where it's so hard to grasp what the actual concerns are.
Absolutely. I think that even now, the modern parent, they're struggling to really understand these worlds. And that also comes from just a generation gap. There were different priorities for different generations, right? There are different quality of life that people are raised in. And, I think a classic example that I see play out at the moment is, when my parents, they got a job, they became passionate about that job because that was their job. So they might as well enjoy doing it and do a good job of it. Whereas, my generation, we're much more like, I only want a job if I'm passionate about it first. And so then you bring that into the technology realm, where the younger you are, the more tech savvy you likely are, especially than your parents. These worlds have opportunities to experience a whole wide range of things, including gambling, including a lot of sexualized violence that also occurs in games like Roblox, predators. I mean, there toxicity. There's a whole range of these things, and I think younger generations are they spend more time on these platforms with a much wider range of experiences that occur. And then parents, I think, don't have much interest or curiosity about them, and that leads to some of the conflicts that we're seeing. Jordan, when I met him, he shared this great example, I thought, back then, where at the time PewDiePie on YouTube had been in a bit of a controversy for saying something racist or sexist or some hate speech of some kind. And I remember Jordan and told me the story of how him and his kids actually sat at dinner table together and watched it, and then had a discussion about it. What did they think about it? What was the line? What was appropriate? What was not? And I think that sort of engagement amongst the family is crucial. But the challenge for parents these days is, I don't think many of them won't care a lot to understand the gaming world. And that instantly creates a barrier for them to understand it.
And it is sensationalized with how much money esports you can make, and how they're saying sports is now going to be replaced by esports, and the third web, and there's a lot of conversations right now that have exponential amounts of careers and money happening in that world, where as a parent you're like, oh,
maybe I just don't know, and maybe there is opportunities. I actually we were talking to a mom that we know, and some people were saying to her, we don't never see your son outside anymore, like what's he doing? She said actually he's really figured out how to work with this video game. I don't know exactly what it was, and he's making a lot of money, and it's like his money is coming into his bank account because he's so good at this video game. And I feel like from her perspective, she was like, maybe he's making a career for himself in there, but she's like, I don't really know how it all works. And we were all like, well, I guess there's something really to say there.
What do we do as a parent when they're excelling in a world that we're not? I guess you sit with them, Jordan. What do we do? Because I think every parent right now is like, is this the future? Are we just going to live in an alternative world, or what do we do here to help them accelerate in technology, but not
also be a part of real life?
Not them let them go rogue.
Yeah, I mean, look, the first thing I want to say, I want to be really clear to parents is that you do know what to do, all right? And this is the one place in my life where I become a conspiracy theorist, which is I think that tech companies have done everything they can to tell people that their technology is so advanced and so crazy and so special that you don't know anything about it. And I think that serves them and nobody else. You might not, I don't know anything about how silicone chips work. I don't really, I took a computer science class in college, and that was like 25 years ago. That's about my level of knowledge. But what I do know is that every generation of parents has had to deal with kids growing up in a world that doesn't look like theirs. My grandparents' world looked nothing like my parents' world. My world looked nothing like my parents. The difference is, in previous generations, parents understood that our job is always to help kids deal in a different context than the one we grew up in. And we do have basic values and morals and ethics and know how to make those decisions. The problem that I would say to parents, and to get back to the question though, when you feel like you don't know what to do, or if you have a kid who's somehow making money, you got to sit down and go to that kid and be like, okay, explain it to me. Let me, and ask the real questions that you have honestly. Go, but wait a second, it's great you're making money, but are you also getting exercise? Are you getting fresh air? Because I have a job, and I know that if I overwork it and don't get exercise and don't get fresh air, I get depressed, I get tired, I get sick. Like, so how are we going to build these healthy relationships around what seems like a really good thing you got going, kid? Right? Like, how do you start to have that conversation?
You make it's so basic and it makes so much sense, but I think because the world is so overwhelming, we'd rather just be like, oh my God, let's ignore it because it feels too big to tackle. And I think
Yeah,
Like,
it's 'cause
for
those
us,
tech companies want the advertisers believing that they have something so magical and so important that advertisers should pay them as much as possible. And meanwhile, the rest of us are also like, it must be magic. It's not magic. It's advertising.
I think, and Cam, you highlighted this with your dad. I had some kids over and they were all talking, and I was just listening. Okay, I was listening, and they were talking about the platform where you can talk to strangers. It starts with a W. You know what it's called, Jordan? Wembley or Wemble, or it's a new platform where they all. Do you know, Cam?
Yeah, I know which one you're referring to. It's something like that.
So it's in the
I'm
younger.
too
It's in
old.
the, it's skewing. Yeah, it's
Younger.
skewing to the middle age. So I'm gonna find it for all the parents. But they were talking about, one of the girls is like, oh, and this guy, he had his penis out, and I couldn't see it at first. Then he was telling me to show, and I thought to myself, okay, I'm just gonna listen to this conversation without freaking out, so I can hear what it is, and then maybe guide. This is maybe a time to say, even as a joke, we never share a body part, even if it's funny, to flash them, because, you're laughing about this situation where you see someone's penis. And I was like, this is hugely inappropriate. But if I go over and react right now, we're going to have a bigger problem. They're going to shut down. And I think, Jordan and Cam, you're both basically saying, listen, immerse, don't get overwhelmed, and let's all slow down before we all freak out, and really just kind of show up in a way that we're not comfortable with, but we have to get comfortable with, because it's not as hard as it sounds.
Do some also, so just Cam, did you ever know and wanted to stop, but you didn't know how? And do some kids know that they're on it too much, but they just can't get away?
Absolutely. And I think, really where my career started was in 2011. I shared my story online on a blog post. And if anyone has written a blog post before, you know how hard it is to get a comment on that baby, right? And so if you get maybe 10 comments, you're like, hallelujah, I'm famous. And this article had 1,600 comments, okay? And these weren't just like, yo, thanks, bro, for the article. They were like 1,000-word essays from kids as young as 10, 11, 12, all the way up 50 plus, everything in between. And they were sharing that they too were struggling with this issue. And the incredible thing for me was what they were sharing was just that they actually wanted to stop. They wanted to move on,
Right.
but they just didn't know how. Really what they did, and I kind of ended my TED talk that I did on the subject with this message, was they were asking for permission to stop, right? They were just asking for permission. And so I used to always just say, you can stop. It's okay. And here are some tips that can help you, which was really basic. Just, here's some new activities you want to find. Here are different ways that gaming fulfills your needs, and you need to replace those in other ways. Here are steps you can take to go make some new friends. Because, if all your friends are gamers, you might not have the same thing in common in the same way. And some will remain and some probably not. And here's how to schedule your day, and here's how to move forward. So I think not just myself, but there were so many other people out there, even now, who really are looking to kind of move forward. And for them, there's a lot of help available now, which is really cool.
And that's really interesting.
Parents need to really hear that. I mean, I think a lot of parents think that the kids, the kids just want to keep going. They don't. They feel that, and just think about this from an adult perspective. Like, how many nights have you stayed up too late binging something on Netflix, and you were like, I can't believe I did that. I should have known better. I have work in the morning, and now I'm going to be tired. Like, kids are feeling that exact same feeling that parents are feeling, and we all screw up sometimes, right? There's lots of nights where I'm like, I can't believe it's 1 a.m. and I just watched another episode. I need to go to sleep. And I think parents need to have that conversation with their kids where they go, sometimes we all go longer than we need to.
Right.
And how do we start to think about the strategies and the times where we can't do that? Do you set an alarm? What do you do? And it's going to be different for every individual.
And
really helpful.
And it's proven that you get a euphoric feeling, right, from social media, from gaming. Like, it's the same feeling as ingesting. I believe it's your dopamine or something that totally spikes when they've created games to make you feel like, oh my God, right? Like, I got to keep going. It's really hard to turn off the game, or to turn off all these things, like the hard likes.
That's their goal, right? Is to keep you as long as possible, because that's how they make money. And it does give, all pleasure involves dopamine, right? So when you get a good grade, when you kiss, when you get a raise, like when you eat pizza, right? Like you get a dopamine rush. And of course, drugs, you get gigantic dopamine rushes. That's why people love it. Video games and social media, they're very good at giving you lots of repetitive small dopamine rushes, right? Like I don't want anyone to imagine, like you said, that like it's the same as like you do coke, right? Cocaine, right? Like doing cocaine, it's the same as no, that's not. But cocaine you do once and get a big dopamine. I mean, nobody should do it. I'm not saying I do it once, but a person might do it. Might do it once and get a gigantic dopamine rush. Video games, you get a very small one, and then as soon as you're ready to quit, they give you another small one, and then they give you another small one, and then they, and so that and that's also, that's what a lot of things do. That's what a good movie does also. That's why a good movie keeps your attention the whole time. And so we do need to be aware of that. Yes, absolutely. And we need to teach our children how to go, hey, the reason I want this right now is because it's trying to keep my attention, not because I have some deep innate desire that makes me need to do it because it's my soul, right? Like, because that's how we start to think as humans. We're like, I want this so much. I need it so much to be myself and to be whole.
No, Jordan, that reminds me so much of what I'm going through right now. It is educating my son about like all of the like lottery tickets. And like when they have that thing on the cereal box and you're going to win like 100,000, he really is so into it. And he wants to be, this could happen to me. And it's that same kind of like, he's like addicted. I'm like, oh my God, we have a mini tiny 7-year-old gambler on our hands. But it's that same kind of, that we need to let him know that they're doing this,
so you're doing that.
Yes.
So
and also we need to let them know that how do you sort of process the stakes on those kinds of things, like explain how hard it is to actually win, right? And that's part of what we do with kids in general. Like kids love to gamble, right? They'll be like, I'm going to just leave my dirty dishes here. I think I might not get in trouble this time, right? Right? Because they don't really understand the stakes, right? So part of it is actually explaining the stakes of going, you do in every situation in your life have to process the stakes. And, like me, I don't sit there and go, I'm going to go bet my life savings on a lottery ticket because it sounds like I could win, because I have learned that, I might go spend $2 on it because I can stomach the $2 risk, right? Yeah. But how do we start to teach that to kids? That's part of growing up in general, because when you're a little kid, you're like, I could jump off this jungle gym. I don't think I'll get hurt, and it's worth the risk.
Yeah, totally. So to you guys, we're so cognizant of your time and so appreciative of it. I think the last question I'd love to leave you with is, parents are like, now what? Like how do I even start? Where do I put my toes? My kid isn't gaming yet, but are they going to start? Or my kid is fully gaming. How do I get in to let them know what Cam's dad did, that, the door is open and we can set some boundaries? Like, where is there any advice from the newbie to the one who is spending too much time on it?
Well, I think where I like to start with this is gaming, when it's a problem, it's the priority in someone's life. It's all encompassing. I was pretending to have jobs. I was quitting jobs. I was dropping classes. Like it was getting rid of anything that got in the way of me being able to play. So to protect from that, it's maintaining balance in a wide range of other activities, right? So what are they going to do when they're at home, when they're tired and bored? How are they going to be socially interacting virtually, but also in person? How are they going to get that exercise? Like, how are they going to continue to develop themselves or have healthy coping strategies? It's making sure that they have their skills and their activities across the board, and that gaming's not the one and only thing that they do. It's the only place they spend any time or interact. I think that's the most crucial element. And depending on how old the kid is, how you approach that's going to be different. But really, that needs to be the approach. And if you accomplish that, it'll save so many of the ways that gaming or technology itself can develop into alternative issues.
Yes. I love that.
I agree with that 100%. And what I would say to the parents of the younger kids, start early, building a sense of of diversity of interests, right? So don't say no, you can't video games. Say, are you video gaming, and are you also reading books, and are you also doing some art project, and are you also spending some time playing outside with friends, and are you doing, and make sure you've built a reality of that's what life is supposed to look like, is that you're doing all of these things, and not one and not the other, you know, and not, as Cam said, letting one completely take over your life. The best time to do that is before they reach puberty, when they still want to please their parents. Okay. If you're after that, it's a much more complicated question, because they already, you know, a pubescent child is trying to prove to themselves that they know how to make sense of the world, is trying to prove to themselves all day long that they have authority, that they know better, that they are adults, that they have adult level consciousness, and they don't, which means they make a lot of mistakes. But that's what their process they're going through. So what we want to do is, before they get to that stage, already give them the tools to be able to experiment with their own personal authority in positive, healthy ways. Once they're teenagers, you know, I think you need to talk to them. I think you need to ask a lot of questions. I think you can ask any question you want. You can say, why are you into this? What do you like about it? And try to do that. And then you have to decide, you know, whether or not it's healthy or unhealthy. If it's a really unhealthy situation, I mean, really, like, we have a lot of media pretending that things that are not unhealthy situations are unhealthy situations, because we love to scare people, right? Cam is talking about really unhealthy situations, not the people who you're like, I'm upset because I call them for dinner and they ignore me, right? Like, my kids ignore me if they're playing with Lego and I call them for, they're ignoring me all the time, no matter what they're doing. And I go, right, that's not, and they cry if I tell them to stop things, because you know, that's normal too, right? Like, that's what kids do. But if it's really unhealthy, like Cam is talking about, where it's like you are not doing other things because you are sacrificing everything else for the, you know, it's the same as drinking, right? Like, have a glass of wine with dinner, that's fine. If you're starting to like skip dinner to drink, you have a problem, right? Like, that's an unhealthy relationship. So I, you know, I think if you have a teenager, you need to talk to them. You have to really take some time, spend a week really gauging what's going on, and if it's unhealthy. And if it's unhealthy, you need an intervention. And there's lots of organizations that can help you with that, like CAMS.
And and we'll link all that. And last question before we can find out where everyone can find you is, any games that you're like hard no? Like, Cam, would you be like, I would never let my younger self play? And Jordan, are you like, absolutely never ever?
I don't want to hear it. I'm scared.
You know, I'll go first and then let you have the last word, Cam. Okay. You know, I think it really depends on the kid. I think, you know, I certainly did not, when my kids were little, let them play games like Call of Duty and, you know, Grand Theft Auto, mostly because it just had things that they weren't mentally prepared to make sense of yet, right? Like, I don't show my kids porn either, right? Like, because they're not mentally prepared, right? They don't understand life yet, right? It's not because I'm afraid that if they played Call of Duty, they were going to become violent. It's not because I thought it was, you know, it's because you just don't, you know, I've always been open. You talk to your kids about everything, but there's also appropriate things. I've been talking to my kids about sex since they were probably 4 and 5 years old, but I didn't know. But now that they're teenagers, I talk in very different ways and with very different language than I did when they were 4, right? So there's a level of appropriateness for age, and I think that's the only question. And you might have a 15-year-old who's really not yet prepared for super violent games because they're still living in some kind of delusional, can't make the distinction, right? And you might have a 8-year-old who you're like, this kid completely gets it, so fine, play whatever you want.
Yeah, assess your child.
For me, it's really just about understanding some games are certainly safer and better than others. And so, you know, a good example of a game that just came out, Diablo Immortal, you know, this game was very much built on sort of a pay-to-win model, where you need to continuously pay more money within the game in order to build your character to be able to compete against other people. Now, this game leads to people spending money more than they need to, spend more money to have fun in a game than they really need to. And this toxicity of spending can go to quite a far degree, especially for young people who are just not really equipped yet within self-regulation to really manage themselves. And so I think that trend coming into gaming, a lot of modern games with monetization schemes, is a big concern for me and something I'm paying a lot of attention to. And certainly my kids would be playing games that, aren't so heavily involved in in-app purchases. But yeah, I just guess I want to kind of end on just parents are listening to this, and this isn't going anywhere. Gaming's not going anywhere. Technology's not going anywhere. So we need to kind of like strap our boots on and approach this like it is something we need to understand and be engaged on. And understanding is always the best place to start, right? So that relationship I had with my dad, he built that by giving me a voice as well and allowing me to share
Showing
my
up.
piece and showing
showed up, right? Yeah.
And I think that relationship within the family is absolutely essential, regardless of whether we're talking about gaming or tech or any other issue that young people are going to come across these days.
We're starting a journal for parents where they can just communicate with their kid in written form, that the kid doesn't have to respond, but you can just leave a note and let them know when your kid doesn't want to hear you. Because I'm assuming, Cam, you didn't always want to hear them, that you're there. And I think just, showing up in different ways, because they're not always apt to listening. So it's so refreshing to hear just showing up, even though it feels like you're not being met by your child showing up.
It's an easy thing to do.
Where can everyone find you? Where can we find your TED Talk, the books, everything you guys do? Because it's so refreshing to hear such an honest conversation.
Sure. So I'll start, and Jordan, you can kind of end. So gamequeers.com is the best place to kind of find resources out there around these subjects, how to keep things healthy, how to intervene if things have become problematic. And you can kind of find Game Queers across social media. We have hundreds of videos on YouTube as well. Game Queers, so GAME and then QUITTERS, gamequitters.com, and the YouTube channel has links to everything else.
Okay, amazing. I want to throw it up on stories because I think some parents going into summer are going to need a lot of help just kind of managing these conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if you want to learn more about me, you can get the book, the I don't know what direction, The New Childhood. That's this one, right? The New Childhood, which is all about parenting in the age of technology. It's available everywhere there are books.
Wow.
But if you want to learn more about it or any of my books or my TED Talk or anything I've written, you can go to Jordan Shapiro, JOR. You can see it on the books behind me too. JORDANSHAPIRO.org.
Wow. I would really appreciate you too. And we've never had a conversation like this with living experts, if that makes sense, who've lived it and are living it. So thank you guys. And I can only imagine how many parents are going to go have conversations or sit down with their kids and maybe play the video game they've never known to play or how to play it.
Or just play Tetris with the kids.
Oh,
chess. Chess also works. I like chess a lot.
Chess is great.
Chess. I've tried Madden the other day. It was not easy. That's what I'm going to say. He loved beating me, though. He thought it was hilarious. So thank you all so much.
Time.
Thanks for having me.